Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All right, friends. This sort of, I've been inspired by all those who have taken the precepts today, and my encouragement on the full moon. I'd like to offer Dhamma reflection, and I encourage you to sit and consider my words. And if it's useful, use whatever you like. And if it's not useful, just leave it. Some of these concepts will be intellectual, philosophical. Some of them, I hope, can be felt intuitively. So as you sit and listen and see what strikes you and what resonates with truth, what will take some consideration to figure out whether or not you have confidence in it, and what you just don't get. Leave that third category aside. Yeah. This is the topic of the evening will be equanimity, Upekkha. And this is something we're contemplating locally. We're thinking about how to discuss this in a family group, so looking at it from multiple angles, but also just thinking of it in a larger context. What is equanimity? Even the word itself in the English language, what does it mean? We'd be hard pressed to come up with a succinct definition for a word like equanimity. It's not one that we use in common speech, and yet it's so essential in the Buddhist teaching. And similarly, as I've remarked with virya, or energy, which shows up in so many different lists of qualities or aspects, upekkha is much the same. In fact, I think even more so than energy. If one were to look in the various lists, they would find just so many instances where equanimity is an important factor that the Buddha highlights, that supports, whether it be enlightenment factors, or it supports Brahma Viharas, the development of mature emotions, or the paramis, the perfections of character that make it possible for us to walk the path. There's so many different aspects to equanimity that I realize in talking about it, I won't be providing answers. I won't be providing a definition. I think what might be more useful is to present this as the theme, to let it sit with you and resonate with you, and to provide a variety of perspectives on it, and see if you can come to your own definition, your own answer about what this is. Because that is, in fact, the perspective the Buddha took. He didn't give us a simple, clear definition that applies in all cases. In fact, since the time of the Buddha, the commentaries have been developing the perspective that, the Buddha is actually talking about slightly different things with different underpinnings in the different lists. The upekkha, the equanimity as an enlightenment factor, is not quite the exact same thing as the Brahmavihara equanimity. And the Brahmavihara equanimity might be closer to the parami equanimity, the perfection equanimity, versus the enlightenment factor. So there's nuance. But in realizing, if they're different things, why didn't the Buddha use a different word? There must be some kind of common thread, and I think we'll be able to find one if we consider it. Yeah. But equanimity, just in and of itself, is so essential to what it is we're doing in practice. And in all the lists, it's provided as one of the last things, one of the culminations of a series of developmental steps. So to understand that this is something to value, and though it might be considered like a development, it might be considered a more subtle and advanced thing, it has to be present from the get-go. So the Buddha encourages us in one framework to develop what's called the equanimity based on diversity. And that is the equanimity, which is being okay with the variety of things and the way that things change, and transcend that into the equanimity based on unity. That is, when we find an underlying principle that we can attend to that supersedes or gets us past all the variety, all the change. There is a liberation which is not fickle, which doesn't come and go, which isn't circumstantial. And that's what we transition from. At first, we develop equanimity with individual things, with individual circumstances, but this leads us onward to an equanimity which is itself, a factor of enlightenment, which is a basis, the mind stabilized. So what is it? Well, balance, equipoise, composure, a sense of being able to weather change, weather circumstance. And in its transcendence, maybe even we can say that equanimity is the ability to go beyond circumstance. Yeah, is the ability to not use how things feel, or how much we like them, or what their apparent story or quality is. To not use any of that as a basis for whether or not we attend to something, but to say that with equanimity, we attend to all things that are presented to us. Yeah. Maybe the first definition we can look at is the one that's used in the Brahma Viharas, and this is probably our most complete definition. So Upekkha as the fourth divine abode, the fourth wholesome emotion. And that is, the Buddha uses a formula. He says, he doesn't say what it is, he says the kind of thoughts that arise, the perspective that arises. And the formula the Buddha uses is, I am the owner, I and all beings am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related to my actions. And I will abide supported by my actions. Whatever actions I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. And this applies to ourselves, and it applies to all beings. So what is it when we are taking that perspective, when we're cultivating it? And what is it when we abide in that perspective? Well, what is it when we don't? Yeah, is I like that, I want to get that. I don't like that, I want to get away from that. This is good, I want this to keep going, and then it stops. And like, well, that's bad. I really wanted that to keep going. Our life is full of anicca, it's full of change. Things are coming and going, and it's all things are not self. We can't possess them, we can't control them ultimately. We can't hold on to them because they're not ours. They're part of a reality, a mingling of different conditions. So sometimes we'll be able to hold on to them and sometimes not. How do we abide okay with that? Well, the equanimity based on diversity is to say, well, this happens based on these conditions. And nothing to do with me. Or, I had a factor in it. Maybe this is a result of my karma. Maybe this is a result of what I'm doing right now, or a result of something I've done in the past. because again, karma is both of these. Or maybe it's not really related to me at all. Maybe it's something completely impersonal, but it is arising from causes and conditions. Yeah. So equanimity is that part of our mind that can say, wait, this is not happening because of me. This is not happening despite me. This is not happening because some deity is looking down and saying, okay, you deserve this. And kind of hitting the smite button, to use a Far Side reference. It's not what's happening. Yeah, it's a natural cause and effect process. The ability of the mind to kind of step into that other paradigm is a sort of strength, is a sort of imperturbability. Yeah. That is something that we recognize we want. And that's the thing. It's like in the worldly context, like there's equanimity as like a parami. Everybody has some sense that this is a wholesome quality. This is a character trait that is useful in the world. And you'd find you'd have trouble finding somebody who'd say that being able to remain calm in different situations is a bad thing. Most people would be like, yeah, no, I'd like to be able to remain calm, be able to remain composed, be able to be cool, yeah? To be stable, when difficult things are happening. We would like that, and we know that that's something good. But to recognize it's not something we're necessarily born with. It's not something that we either have or we don't have. It is a matter of perspective. It is something cultivated. It is something developed. We can get better at equanimity, but we have to understand its underpinning. It is about perspective. Yeah, we have to move from the worldly paradigm, which is to like and evaluate and move towards and crave things, to a different perspective, one that says, rather than being okay because of things, being okay because this is working out, can I be okay with things? Can I be okay however this works out? And very, very famous story. I've probably shared it with many of you before. The story of the Zen Farmer. If you Google Zen Farmer, you get just 1,000 renditions of this story. So very, very quickly, the story of the Zen Farmer is there's a farmer who's living with his son out in the countryside, and one day the son leaves the pasture gate open, and their only horse, which they use to plow the fields, runs off. And villagers hear about this, and they come. They're like, "Oh, what bad luck! So sorry." And the farmer's like, "Well, who can say what's good or bad?" A few days later, that horse returns, but it's got some wild horses following it. And so the farmer and the son, they gather up those horses and put them in the pasture, and suddenly they've got more horses than they started with. So the villagers hear about that, and they're like, "Oh, what good fortune! Imagine that! How random, how rare, how amazing!" And the farmer's like, "Well, who can say what's good or bad?" Now, a few days later, the farmer's son is trying to tame one of the horses, and it's a wild horse, so it knocks him off. The farmer's son lands on the ground and breaks his leg. Villagers hear about that and it's like, "Well, he was helping you with the farm. Oh, what bad fortune!" And the farmers say, "Well, who can say what's good or bad?" A few days later, the army is coming through town and they're conscripting all the able-bodied men. But the farmer can't be conscripted because he's got to take care of his son who can't walk, and his son can't be conscripted because his leg is broken. And so the two of them are passed over, and everybody else is marched off to war. And the women of the village, come and they visit and they say, "Oh, good fortune, you'll be able to harvest your crops. You won't be off in battle, perhaps killed." And the farmer's like, "Well, who can say what's good or bad?" And they probably said, "Yeah, we knew you would say that." Because that is equanimity. And I like to think of that as the parami equanimity. That story is what it would be like to apply this to your lifestyle, what it would be like to develop this as a real strength of character, that this is how you actually are in the world. This is your state of being, is you don't jump to conclusions about things. This thing is pleasant, but I didn't necessarily have to buy into the fact that it's good. This is unpleasant. I don't have to buy into the fact that it's bad. By relinquishing that quality of our mind that wants to make a story and develop a perspective and a bias about things, by letting that down, we've actually saved ourselves the use of a lot of extra energy. We've saved that energy. We're like, well, okay, it would be a big thing to build up a story about why this is such a problem and it's so unfair. And I just skip that part. Yeah. And in skipping it, we're more likely to be there for the next moment. It's a very simple causal process. Renunciation, relinquishment, does have a result. Actually, renunciation has always got a wholesome result. It always frees up space for others, space for ourselves, space in the mind, room to breathe. And equanimity is that power of character that gives us the ability to do that. There's this different perspective on life. And that is a very different perspective. I think most of us in the Western world, we wake up and are like, we got some kind of Tony Robbins mentality. And it's like, I'm going to seize the day. And we're looking in the mirror and like, how can I be my best self today? And we're taught to do this. This is our culture. This is our inheritance. This is what we're being told. Every commercial is like, go get that thing that you want quickly before it's gone. That's what we're being told. So it's very natural. And that is one perspective. And this other perspective, this perspective of equanimity, is so much more mellow, yeah? It's so much more like, I'm here. I'm here because I woke up. I'm here because I'm still breathing. So I'm going to continue to be here. And let's just see how this plays out. Yeah. Some people would say, well, that doesn't sound very exciting. But in practice, it's much easier, actually. It's much more interesting. It gives you, it's sort of like a basis from which you can take interest in anything, even something unpleasant. And I think many practitioners, as they develop over time, they start to notice that they're taking an interest in things that they couldn't even bear before. Their leg starts to fall asleep, and this is like, this is such a funny tingle. Or a cup falls on the ground, and like, it's just like that Ajahn Chah quote. Yeah. Or they're, their car, just stops working, and they realize they've got to get a new one, and they're like, oh, thank goodness, I really wanted a new car. Now I've got a totally good reason to get a new one. Our whole perspective starts to change, and we're like, who can say what's good or bad? And what happens is we start liking what's just being there for everything, being there for this experience, being there for this experience, being there for this experience. That is, I think, maybe the way that I've come to think of equanimity as a Brahmavihara, where it relates to a quality of the heart, where it relates to like an emotional state, is our willingness to be with what is happening right now, our willingness to share in this experience. There's something of an interpretation for this phrase, I am the heir of my karma, born in my karma, related to my karma. I kind of started to see it over the years, is that if something is happening right now, the fact that it is arising in my consciousness, the fact that I am aware of it, means that to some degree, I'm responsible. Yeah. And so this idea of, oh, that's their problem. That's their problem. I can't be bothered with this, stops happening. And that thought stops coming up. And if somebody's having a problem, you're just there with them. Somebody's in pain, you're just there with them. If there's a problem, you don't immediately jump to, I've got to fix this, but you're like, that's a problem. Yeah, let's look at this. What would be the wisest course here? And that real deep-seated sense of being with and being okay with being with develops not just a quality of heart and a development. It's like equanimity as a Brahmavihara is said to come through the development of metta, through the development of compassion, through the development of sympathetic joy, delighting in other people's success. You begin to see all these different states of pleasure and pain, and you're with all of them. Yeah. The culmination of that is being able to just be with anything. Yeah. You don't try to get out of it. It's an interesting thing how our interest in getting out of a situation creates a sense of self. In those moments of equanimity where we're just with the situation, it's really funny how our sense of self doesn't come up as much. Yeah. We're thinking about, what am I getting out of this? Or when am I going to get to leave? Or when am I going to get to do what I want to do? As it starts to develop into equanimity, we're just like, oh, it's like this. Oh, it's like this. Oh, look at that. Huh. They're going through this. The whole dichotomy of me and them, of subject and object, it's just not even arising. And so in the lists of what we call the Enlightenment Factors, and that is mindfulness, investigation of states, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Equanimity is the last one. Yeah. It's considered to be like the highest development in terms of these enlightenment factors. And that is not to say that everything else, has to be there before there's equanimity. Obviously, we have equanimity all of the time. But when it's seen as what is necessary for insight, breakthrough insight into the nature of reality, actually stepping out of that paradigm where we believe in a self and we're trying to get things and it's all about pleasure and pain and the worldly winds, actually stepping out of that into, there is this experience, it's like this completely impersonal, completely engaged sense of being in the world is an insight, is a major transition, and it takes energy. I like to think of the enlightenment factors as energetic states, as sort of like nodes, are sort of like capacitors in the mind. These things have to charge up. Once they've charged up, then it's possible to make this transition. But if we don't have equanimity, to say nothing of mindfulness and energy and rapture and samadhi, if we don't have equanimity, we can't make that shift. Because if we honestly truly believe that I need to get that thing to be happy, we will not let it go. But in that moment where we know that my happiness is not coming from that thing, I'm either happy with that thing or happy without that thing, but my happiness is independent. In that moment, we can let go. Yeah? So we don't say that equanimity comes from letting go. We say that once equanimity is there, letting go is possible. That's why, we use the word letting go really easy, but doing the thing is not easy. Yeah? Doing the letting go requires some basic resources of mind. The enlightenment factors themselves are nuanced. Mindfulness is always appropriate. But the other ones, which one we're cultivating or depends on balancing. Yeah. And it's very interesting, if we have a lot of energy and investigation of states, but it's leading to being restless, then we cultivate the rapture and the tranquility. If or the tranquility, the equanimity, the tranquility, all of those. Whereas if we're really falling asleep, then we would cultivate the other ones, the energy and the investigation of states and the rapture and all of that. But all through these, the idea is what that seventh enlightenment factor is: balance, equipoise, composure. That's what it develops towards, and that's how it culminates. Yeah. And so these are some thoughts, and I ask you to just consider this state. And there's been many meditation retreat I've been on where I start out, and this is just my experience. So I start out like really wanting to get something from the retreat, and I'm working and I'm investigating, and oh, there's that light. Okay, yep, follow the light. And I was like, okay, is that piti? Is that sukha? Is this? Am I close to jhana? Is that jhana? Is that jhana? Is that no? Not yet. Yeah. Oh no. And starting out like really trying to get something from the retreat. But time and time again, what I've found is that day 3, day 4, day 5, I feel this sense of stability, this sense of being okay with the coming and going and the up and the down. And as my back is starting to hurt more, as I'm starting to really get way more obsessed with the daily meal, as a lot of stuff is developing in terms of like, yeah, I'm on retreat. This is not totally pleasant Vedana. Nevertheless, this sense of being okay with it starts to develop. And it's very interesting that you go in trying to get something from the retreat, like getting jhana or getting insight or getting enlightenment. But somewhere along the way, what you realize is because of the process of letting go, you got the thing that you really needed. What you really wanted was equanimity. What you really wanted, why you did this thing, which isn't necessarily supposed to be about results, though there are different results that can happen. What you got was the okayness of what you got. Yeah. The whatever you got in the end is also mixed with the sense of being okay with what you got. You feel more calm, more steady. And that usually when I realize this partway through the retreat, it's like, oh, I am not here to get that thing. I'm here for this thing I'm starting to experience, this equanimity. Then my whole approach to the retreat shifts for the rest of the retreat. Yeah. Because it's like, well, if I it's like being able to predict the future. Yeah. If at the end of the retreat I didn't get enlightened, how can that be the best possible result if I'm equanimous? If at the end of the retreat I did get enlightened, and how could that be the best possible result if I'm equanimous? Yeah. It's sort of like it's an easy gamble. Yeah. If I were to cultivate equanimity instead of this blind pursuit of results, I'm more likely to be happy at the end of the retreat. And conversely, what we tend to find is when we are equanimous, we are more likely to be successful in what we're doing. And it's something I've often said that you see in group dynamics. In any group of people, the person with the most equanimity tends to be the person ultimately in charge. But that's usually the last person who has their say. Everybody else is like throwing in their ideas and, this is better and this is better. The person who is most equanimous, most willing to be with the results, but most also has the most balance and perspective on the results, is ultimately the one who is there after everybody has gotten in all their scuffles and decided who's right and what, and taken leadership roles and done this and tried this and that. At the end of the day, the person with the most stamina, the most balance, who is the most calm and cool through the whole process, is the one who's still standing at the end and is saying, okay, guys, just one more push. We've almost got it. Yeah. They're the one who is ultimately in charge. And it's the same in our own lives. Yeah. We start to realize that this is that important thing, that important quality that is ultimately deciding how successful we are in our practice. And yet it is not the thing we actively cultivate most of the time. It's more of like a byproduct. It's more charging up along the way, because it's not easy. It's not easy to be really motivated about practice and really okay with whatever happens. But we do start to get the hang of it along the way. Yeah. And nobody can tell us how to do it. So that's why I've given a lot of perspectives on this factor. And maybe this will help you talk about it. This will help you think about it. This will help you investigate it when you're on the meditation cushion. Okay. And so on tonight, the Uposatha, inspired by everybody's diligent practice, many of you having practiced all day with your various precepts, I offer this reflection